Welcome back to Silicon Heartland Sessions, the podcast where we explore the real stories behind tech leadership, transformation, and the human side of innovation. Today, I'm joined by Mick Miller, Senior Product Manager on the Cloud Engineering team at KeyBank. He's a builder, a strategist, and someone who brings equal parts depth and curiosity to everything he touches. And Mick's journey, believe it or not, began with a leap from life in the circus into the world of IT. He's a firm believer in growth through hard times, in the power of systems thinking, and in holding on to hope, even when the road gets tough. So, Mick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Welcome back.
Yeah.
So, hey, before we dive in, I'd love to give you a chance to just kind of say hello to our listeners. Is there anything you want to share to kind of kick things off?
Well, it's I used to do a lot of public speaking, podcasts, and that,
Yeah.
and then I switched from what I was doing to cloud stuff,
Hmm.
and there was lots of opportunities to do things and speak, and I was really adverse to doing it, and so I tried to think about what the heck is that because I have a theater background, so I don't mind
Hmm.
speaking. I'm uncomfortable. And it came down to it is that I don't like in this world speaking about things that I'm not fluent in and comfortable. And it
Yeah.
took me 7 years of being in the trenches to get to the point um, where I had a better idea of what I wanted to say.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I'm at a place. I don't think I have all the answers, but I think I have something to contribute to our overall social network
Hmm.
of IT oriented folks and non IT folks, and I think I have something to contribute. So I'm looking forward to finding that on this call and sharing my perspective, which is granted mine, but after 45 years of doing this, I think I have
Yeah.
something to share.
Oh, I believe you do, and I know from experience.
Mm,
having seen you speak at Cloud Nirvana,
yeah,
and the podcast, the episode we did with the crew from Cloud Nirvana Cleveland. So yeah, thanks for that. There's something to be said for the skill in terms of being able to understand what to talk about.
yeah,
The other side of it is how you go about doing it as well. And both of those are skills that require just I think it's just practice
yeah,
and just conversation. So let's jump in.
yeah.
I kind of want to jump right into kind of the where your intersection between your personal life and your career. So I know that your work spans deep tech, team building, and of course leadership at a
Mhm,
large enterprise.
yeah.
How do you personally approach balance in your daily life, and what helps you stay grounded and creative?
Well, I can tell you that there was a time when I would tell folks that would kind of be interested in this answer to do exactly the opposite of what I've been doing. Um,
Okay.
so after two divorces and uh, and getting to the point where I really found myself living a very unbalanced life, uh, and not having addressed that because if you were to come into my shop, I'm kind of a multidisciplinary guy. I do a lot of different stuff and not
Hmm.
just IT. And say if you were to talk to me while I'm, say, working on a guitar amplifier or something like that, you could come up behind me and talk to me, and I wouldn't understand you. I am one of these very laser focused folks, and I think during most of my career in IT, I was that laser focused that it. I wasn't really finding that.
Hmm.
And I don't, and again, I mean, I'm not kidding. I don't recommend it. I recommend you take a break and find uh, some level of balance. For me, and it's not for everybody else. I found that I had a pretty good intellectual life. I was still in okay shape and biking and doing stuff like that, and a fairly decent physical life. And I had completely given up on after years of research on my spiritual life. And it was really important for me to fill that gap.
Hmm.
And after many, many years, and I know this is a major non sequitur and it's not for everybody. In fact, I highly don't recommend this, is I converted to Judaism.
Wow.
And I found that that one thing really tied it all together in terms
Hmm.
of my being able to both live a balanced life, and I'm a happier person, and I can contribute more at work. I'm a less
Yeah.
independent person. So I think being passionate about all the things you do, but making sure that you also be passionate about more than one thing, like being passionate about my family and my kids. I have 5 kids,
Right.
and I think that's critical. And I would say that I'm much happier after, and that maybe 15 years ago. Uh, so I don't know if that was what you're looking for, but
No, that's
I think
that.
it's important. You're a human being, and you got to make sure that you can be your best human being, and no
Yeah.
matter what you do.
I agree, and I love how you sort of define everything around this notion of passion. But you mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
your passion around building
Yeah,
audio amplifiers using tubes and so forth, and
yeah,
I have to imagine that it's not just the passion, it's also the focus that you put into it. And so
yeah,
when you're doing that work, you're 100% focused on that work, where
100%.
it's so hard to do that nowadays, with all of the distractions and
It really is.
yeah. So
It really is.
do you like when you're focused on something, do you turn off your notifications
Yes,
and mute your phone and things
yes,
like that? And yeah,
yeah.
that's hard. It's
And
hard for me. I'll be the first to
it
admit.
is hard, but you just have to turn it off because yeah. We'll maybe talk about this later. There was this fella, I read a bunch of his books, but Tom DeMarco, he wrote this
Hmm.
book called Slack. And one of the research studies he did, and there's been a lot of research around this, but the whole idea of context switching is brutal. And
100%.
and and, and
Yeah.
in our world where we're juggling multiple thoughts at the same time,
Yeah.
and they all fall down because of a ping or something like that on your phone or on your Teams or Slack or whatever.
Yep.
It's you can't. Here's the thing: is in our world, uh, building intellectual property, right? We're software is a collection of ideas, i.e.,
Right.
right?
Mhm, mhm.
And how do you know the difference between good software and great software? It's not that complicated, really. Great
Mhm.
software has the best ideas in it.
Hmm, interesting.
How do you have your best ideas if you're continually being interrupted? The answer is
Yeah,
you can't,
very true.
right? So, anyways, yeah, I turn it all off. So, staying, I intend to stay focused, but I also know to pull the plug and stand up and walk away nowadays. So,
Right. No,
right,
I hear you.
yeah,
I hear you. Yeah, you had mentioned earlier the book Managing Humans by
mm,
Michael Lopp,
yeah,
and, one of the things that he talks about is about burnout
yeah,
and how real that is, and
mhm,
he sort of defines it as this notion of a leadership blind spot.
mhm,
The idea being that, when managers treat speed as like a default, then they miss
yeah,
the warning signs of fatigue and disengagement
right.
and resentment.
And like I use the term Slack, if you don't have people build Slack into their schedules, like when we're
Uh-huh.
doing sprint planning, we only use 4 to 5 hours
Mhm.
per day. We don't use 8 hours. People have to have Slack to have
Yeah.
their best ideas.
Yeah. And it's not just Slack. Slack isn't just about recovery. It's
No,
not, or just taking a break. It can be about sharpening the saw. It could be about pulling yourself up out of that sprint and questioning,
yeah,
and reminding ourselves of the why.
that's
Those
right,
kinds of things I think are really
100%.
important. Yeah. That
Yeah,
that
I mean, it's that when you're on a focus driven path and you tend to have blinders on.
yeah.
That's both good and it's
Mhm.
also horribly bad,
Right.
right? So you got to find you have to step back and admire for a little bit,
Yeah.
or throw up or something. I don't know, but I mean, I
No,
don't
that
know how you've written. I've written code, And 2 days later, I'll go back and look at it and I'll go, "What was I thinking?"
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I've done that many times myself.
Yeah,
When you look at things with a set of fresh eyes, or
yeah.
have somebody else look at it,
Mhm,
and being willing to change based on the feedback that you're getting either from yourself or others. Yeah, I think that's critically important. At the end of the day, we all make mistakes.
yeah,
When in my
mm,
mind, one of the like hardest but most defining parts of leadership is learning from the things that didn't go well.
mhm,
Looking back, what are a few of the top missteps that you've made,
mhm.
and what did they teach you?
Well, there's been a lot, along the way. I would say there's for years I tried to do kind of the waterfall thing, and where you're trying to do big front planning, and you do stage gate development, and it was because it was required where the places I was working, and I tried, okay, I'll make a go of it, and I got my PMP and all that kind of stuff, and
Wow, cool.
that was brutal too. I mean,
I bet.
because I hated it, I knew it was flawed, but I had to, and I used to teach classes on it, things like that. But
Wow.
anyways, I think the biggest mistake is like in the Phantom Toll booth, jumping to the land of conclusions. You make decisions about things, and then you're inflexible
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
innovation. You're inflexible about discovery. You're inflexible about having breakthrough thoughts because you have to stick to this thing that you've built. And the process of putting in change orders and change records and rebaselining and redoing all of your financial models was I used to think that the reason they invented all those things was to make it impossible to make changes because it was not worth doing all that work. So,
Hmm.
but anyways, I would say the number one thing is being inflexible in your thoughts and not. I think Agile allowed us to, like the whole Agile movement or iterative movement, allowed us to embrace not knowing. I mean, that's the hardest thing. I can't even work with folks that won't question.
Hmm.
Possible, or they know everything, and it's. I mean, our team looks up from time to time and asks, "You know what you're doing?" And I go, "Nope." You know, nope. Okay, good. And we move on. Because having being constantly open to about your incorrect your inability to tell the future. So that's probably the number one thing that's hurt most often is making is not being flexible enough to be able to change. On the other
Yeah.
side of that is uh, I think there was a pendulum that swung too far, the other way, uh, where
Mm.
where where we started to piss off business uh, because we couldn't tell them when we were going to be done or when we were going to do things. And I felt like sprinting was kind of the thing that allowed me to. I can't tell you what day and time that I'm going to be done with something, but I can
Hmm.
tell you what sprint in my 2 week sprints over time when things are anticipated to be done, and also having the conversation that you can't meet all three sides of the triangle, resource, time, and scope, and that we would in the model that we're using, we're always going to change scope because that's the only variable we have to work with. And
Hmm.
so managing those kinds of conversations ahead of time, but initially I was, I don't know, and I can't tell you either. That also didn't work, and I think it got us into a lot of trouble. Uh, if you're familiar with Agile, and I think most people at this point are,
Hmm.
there was a period where it was really exciting and people really wanted to do it. And I've never been to a company yet, big company, that after a short period of them doing Agile, they immediately banned it. And you can go through any major corporation, you're going to find that.
Hmm.
And I think that if you get into it, why did they go ahead and do that? Because that seemed like a really bad idea. It was
Yeah.
because of the inflexibility and it was kind of the hacking approach.
Mm.
So almost all companies I've talked to have, like, I just talked to someone at Progressive, and they're reinstituting their agile thing now, but in a more disciplined way. And I think if you really think about agile, it's actually harder than waterfall doing
Yeah.
doing it
Yeah.
correctly. And
Yeah.
so, anyways, I think both, being being inflexible. Well, I guess you could also say I was being inflexible about agile too. So, um,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, one of the main things that I think about when I sort of compare, at least in my mind, the waterfall model to the agile model, and the reason why I think waterfall is much easier is because
yeah,
it's a step-by-step sequential process.
yeah,
Whereas in agile, you're maximizing the capacity of your team, and things are happening in parallel. There's a lot going on. And so
mm,
managing that work is really important. And perhaps I kind of have a philosophy, kind of going back to what you're saying about agile, and this notion of constraints. Because when we first started talking
mhm,
about constraints, it sounded to me like you were talking about our own mental constraints that we put on ourselves, the limiting
yep, yep,
beliefs and so forth. Which I agree with you. That is, that constraining belief system can stifle creativity. It
yeah,
can stifle innovation. But like if you go back to like this whole idea of agile
mhm,
and the constraints that you put in place in terms of the process and the roles. And so for those
yeah,
constraints can actually be liberating,
sure,
and that's and can help create creativity. Because when you're working within the context of a process, and this isn't something that just applies to agile, it applies
yeah,
to all kinds of different things.
yeah,
But when you're operating within those constraints, you have dramatic flexibility or and latitude to be able to make decisions because
sure.
you know where the boundaries are.
And you have a well-known set of, borders or gates that you're not going to go over,
100%,
like time
100%.
boxing things. Nope, it's going to take this time. That's it. That's how much time it takes.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you had mentioned the book The Goal by
Mm,
Elijah
yeah.
Il, Il,
Great story. Oh,
Eliyahu
Yahoo.
Goldratt.
Gold rat.
Yeah, and he talks about how constraints unlock creativity. I love the way in which he talks about
Yeah.
sort of it's like the intersection, between constraints and innovation. And it's where you start to realize that, those constraints, they're not barriers. Those are focal points for innovation.
Yeah.
I think he makes a very compelling argument for the importance of not only knowing those constraints, but leaning into them.
Sure.
Yeah, to help foster creativity.
I mean, it's really interesting. You could. It just occurred to me when you said that, because that's really important that what he said, but also that
Yeah.
he was Israeli and Jewish.
Yes.
And I'm not obviously like a super Orthodox Jew, but
Hmm.
I do follow things. And to be Jewish means to have a lot of constraints, a real
Yeah.
lot of constraints. And people say, "Isn't that stifling?" And just like you said, no, actually, it's freeing.
Hmm.
It's completely freeing. It's probably those things. I think that once you're comfortable with this other completely unrelated thing in your life, like having boxes and constraints around what you can do, and then moving that into software, that same concept is way easier to follow and understand if you've done it, or vice versa. You know what I'm saying? So I think
Hmm.
I believe in whole human beings. Okay, so and
Yeah.
I don't believe in having my IT life and then my other life. I don't think that that's a
Yeah.
thing. I have my life, and that's what I got. You know?
Yeah, I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you.
And
And kind of going back to when we first started talking, and you were talking about how in your earlier years you were very unbalanced.
yeah.
And the thing that really brought everything together for you was your conversion
Hmm.
to Judaism. So it sounds to me like that has provided a framework for you in your life
So much.
that has given you the ability to have that balance.
Yeah. Yeah. It has in many ways. It's contributed in both worlds.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a whole story in and of itself, but uh, not this topic. That's over a beer. Sorry. Whiskey.
Sounds good.
Maybe
Well,
whiskey.
I will take you up on that
All
soon, my
right.
friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great, man. So speaking of
Yeah.
having a beer, I'm not leading the witness here or anything like that.
Wow.
If you could design a day
Yeah.
with no constraints, no meetings, no deadlines, unlimited budget and time, what would that day look like
Mhm.
and why?
You mentioned that, and I just did that. And and
Oh, really?
and what does that mean is, because my team told me we just did that, and
Mhm.
so anyways, I have this cycle with my team. I like to, drives my bosses crazy, but I like to have a pretty good list of what we call big rocks, and I'm not gonna go into what that means, but look
Mhm.
it up. And those big rocks, we have each team has about 10 or 12 of them. And then we meet at the beginning of the year to look at last year and then look at this year, what the big rocks and which ones we accomplished. And we look at it and go, we're never going to get it done. But then when we did the retrospective, we go, damn, how do we get all that stuff done? We do that every year, and 7 years going. And then we meet mid-year, and then we do it again at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
So I had everybody come into Cleveland, and then the next 2 days I had hackathons, and each
Hack of things.
hackathons, and
Okay.
each it's like a hackathon, but it was a
Yeah,
hackathon.
yeah.
There was 3 different teams, and each team did a different thing. They hacked a different thing, and one team was looking at redesigning our Google Cloud network layers,
Mm.
and that was exciting. The other team looked at taking 3 different ML machine learning models for forecasting,
Mhm.
one in Python, one in BigQuery's built-in ML engine, and another one using some Python packages.
Okay.
And then I worked on one kind of by myself, on using Google Secrets Manager and automating how to do that.
Mm.
Anyways, the 3 teams after we did the whole thing for 2 days, and at the end of the day, we talked about it, and everybody said, "I wish I could do this every day." All the
Heck
constraints were gone. Everyone's computers were turned off, and we are adopting a lot of the stuff we just built over those 2 days.
yeah.
2
Mhm.
days, more than we can get done in a whole month or year. Brand new ideas, and it was truly inspiring to see the team that inspired, and then present to other teams our findings. Uh, it was really satisfying. So I
Yeah, I bet
pulled
it
every
was.
levers.
Did each one of these teams and their deliverables, did they align to some of the big rocks that you'd mentioned?
Yeah, and in fact, that's why we did them.
Yeah.
We took the most gnarly ones. So,
Right. Yeah,
or
heck yeah.
yeah.
What a great idea.
So, anyways, I guess in short, have you ever read Skunk Works?
I know about it, but I haven't read the
Yeah,
book.
it's about the design of stealth fighters and the U-2 and the so on, right? And it was,
Yeah.
what was really interesting about that book was, uh, that and I'll tell you why they call it the Skunk Works in a second, is they said, let's stop doing the design of aircraft where we keep on throwing things over the wall, and let's
Mhm.
literally get all the engineers together, sound familiar, at
Yeah.
one table. And they said, yeah, let's try that. They built a tent. As it turns
Mhm.
out, the tent was next to a chemical factory and it smelled horrible, and that's why Skunk Works became
Oh,
the
I see.
name of it, coming from Little Abner, if you're that old, comic strip. But anyways, that's what we did. We got different disciplines all together at the table for an intense amount of time, solving the same problem. And that's rare that you get a chance to do that with, like, one team had 7 people on, the other one had 4, and then mine had 1. So, uh, but, I think that if you were to say, what if I could do anything, it would be taking disciplines from multiple, facets, within your organization or your personal life or wherever,
Mhm.
and getting everybody together to solve something. Uh, there's a guy, Jim Highsmith, wrote a book a long time ago, around the beginning of Agile, and he adopted Agile ideas to a computer science, or actually a science area called CAS, Complex Adaptive Systems.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like what happens when you take different things and put them together, it creates they bond and create these ecologies. What happens when you do that with people, right? You can have your best ideas because you're not constrained by m- um, myopic thinking based
Mhm.
on your history and all of that. Remember, I mean, my whole concept is pretty simple in building stuff. It's having people have their best ideas,
Right.
right? It is because that's what you get when you build things. Your solutions are just people's ideas. There's nothing else going on. It's not that complicated. We as a formula, software equals team.
Right. There you go, man.
You have a shitty team, you get shitty software.
Well
You have a
said.
great team, you get great software. Not
There you
always
go, man.
guaranteed, but anyways, that's it. That's the formula.
Hmm.
Get the best people together, multidisciplinary, not your favorites, and get together and solve something.
Yeah.
All
Oh,
the
that sounds
constraints
great.
come off, right?
Heck yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that thinking.
Mm,
You seem to me to be a very optimistic, also a very rational kind of a person.
mm.
And I'll say that when we were talking earlier, I asked you what if you could choose a theme song for your life. You said
Yeah,
you said "Don't Stop Believin" by Journey,
definitely.
and so I have to ask, what's the story behind that pick, and how does it show up in the way that you lead or
Right.
navigate life?
Um, there's a couple things. So, mostly it came from me working with a company called Explorus here in Cleveland. They were a startup in the medical field, and when you're in that environment, uh, th- every release can be challenging because you've never done it before. It's all new stuff, and I kind of have this theory with a lot of evidence that anytime you try to do anything fantastic, awesome, the world, the universe is against that. I know that sounds really like weird, but it's true for me. And things come out of the woodwork to stop you. Bugs that you've never seen before, constituents that says no, you're not allowed to do that, and or no, did you get this in there? So it's all these things to just stop you from putting the thing over the goal line,
Yeah,
right? The theme song at Explorers was "Don't Stop Believing," and we
nice.
played it very loud during ship days.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's so
yeah,
cool.
we had to
Yeah.
because you really can get into your head and get caught up and get
Mhm.
the worst thing to do when you're in that kind of a, to use military terms, that kind of a battle
Mhm.
is to back down,
Hmm.
right? You have to continue to drive it forward. And, it reminds me of that Pulp Fiction and I'm not going to say it, but Samuel Jackson's wallet. You have
Oh,
to
yeah,
be
no
that,
kidding.
right? You got to be
Yes.
that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Wow.
that badass Emma, multiple.
Yeah.
So
No,
you got to
yeah,
be.
I remember that
Yeah.
scene very, very
I
well.
seem really
Yeah.
timid, but maybe or not when I'm shipping. You
Oh, I
got to. I
love
mean,
it, man.
you got to drive the team. The team's expecting you to drive forward, and you're expecting
Yeah.
them to win. I'm not one of those generals that stand in the back. I'm that weird sergeant that's on the front lines getting shot at.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. So, speaking of generals and
Mm.
leadership and so forth, and kind of the leadership journey that you've taken, what what are the core principles that like guide your leadership style, and where did they come from? I mean, I have some
Yeah, yeah.
idea as to where they came from, but how have they evolved over time?
Right. It. I would say there was a long period, in the 80s and part of the 90s where we were just kind of doing new stuff and we didn't
Hmm.
really know what we were doing. But we'd ship stuff and get it out. It never
Yeah.
felt great, but um, we were doing that kind of stuff. And as either a contributor or a leader or some, often I play both.
Yep.
The I just wasn't sure what I was driving for,
Hmm.
and it wasn't till I got down to this one. in many ways, I'm kind of simplistic in that I like to try to find that what's that one thing? Okay, maybe two, but what's that one thing
Mhm.
where if you adopted that or embraced that, everything else would change on its own without you having to manage it. There are things like that. There's that whole fake story, but it's a good story about the 100th monkey. You're familiar with that?
No, I'm not. Yeah, let's hear it.
You can look it up on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
The story goes that there was a I think a Malaysian island where these monkeys uh, were living there, and there's lots of islands with lots of different monkey tribes, and they would eat what they could. Uh, but then one monkey, I guess, on the island found that there was this root that if it was terrible, but if you put it in the salt water
Mhm.
and took all the dirt and stuff off of it, it kind of curated, and it was actually really good and nutritious.
Hmm.
And then another monkey learned about it, and then families were doing it, and then more families on the island were doing it, and then something happened like overnight that all the monkeys on all the islands started doing it. That's the 100th
Really?
monkey. So there's this inertia that you get over. So in that sense, can you find that one change, that tweak that affects all of the things you're trying to do? For me, that one thing is, as a manager and a leader, is make sure people can have their best ideas. Period. Now, there's a lot of strategy to getting that done, but that's the theme. If you're overworked, or I don't value your input,
Mhm.
or um, I don't let you work with other teams, I lock you in a room, tell you to do something, or I get really nasty with you, I don't allow you to fail, right?
Mhm.
In any one of those scenarios, you cannot have your best ideas. It's
I
not
agree.
possible,
Yeah.
right?
All of those things are just creativity stiflers. 100%.
So that's kind of the main theme is figure out how to have people have their best ideas and be that person that drives them. So I'm not like, I don't care what you do. I'm a pretty hard driver for things, but uh, I'm driving. Like I get really irritated at my team. One
Mhm.
person in particular, I won't share the name. When this person is up at 8 o'clock at night working, that
Um,
really ticks me off because I
yeah.
know that this person can no longer, if they keep doing that, will not have their best ideas. And this person's amazing and they really
Mhm.
want to try hard. And I have to be nice and then not so nice and then directive,
Right.
right? And now they don't do that anymore. But I have to watch for that all the time,
Yeah.
right? Where are people doing things? Like some guy came at me the other day on a call and he was pretty nasty on the call, directed at
Hmm.
me, and I said, "Whoa, cowboy, put your pistols away." So I could have taken it another way, right?
Mhm.
Right? And I said, "Put your pistols away. Let's talk about this. Tell me what you're
Yeah.
thinking.
Heck
Let
yeah.
me hear your ideas." Because he felt like his ideas I wasn't going to allow him to have. And at the end, I went, "Wow, those are great ideas. I agree with you 100%."
Mhm.
And if it turned the other way, you know, I would have also said that. I have
Sure.
this. So Jim McCarthy, going to Jim, has a thing called the the circle of greatness, I think he calls it, or something like that.
Mhm.
It's not complicated, and it's the same theme here. And it says that in order to get to greatness, there's a way to do that. And the first thing is you have to have engaged, passionate people. By
Yeah.
passion, I mean having their best ideas, right?
100%.
And you as a team, not just me, but the team has to uh, has to, because you have competing ideas, have to embrace conflict, not negative conflict, but you have to embrace. You can't disengage. You have to engage with, like with Jim. I engaged with him. I
Mhm.
didn't back away and go, "Oh, geez, he's pissed off at me." No, I was like, I didn't make fun of him either, but I was like, I was also trying to break down the intensity so we could have a realistic conversation. So passionate people cause conflict.
100%.
Embracing conflict, right, allows you to get to your best ideas, right? Allows you to be there, and only that is the path towards a greatness. So
100%.
again, people having their best ideas, when people are having their best ideas, there's going to be conflict.
Yeah.
There's going to
Yeah.
be. And if you stifle that or try to step away from it, you're going to break that.
Yeah. It kinda reminds me of, the book Managing Humans by
Yeah.
Michael Lopp,
Yeah.
where he says, it's this whole notion where, great leaders, like, remove friction, not just obstacles.
Yeah.
The best managers, like, make the mess invisible.
Yeah.
How do you think about your role in, like, shaping the system that your team works within
Yeah.
beyond individual issues to do just that,
Yeah.
to kind of remove that friction so that you're creating space where those
Yeah.
ideas can really flourish?
Yeah. I gotta be careful what I say here. I work at a bank, so there's a lot of compliance
Yeah,
and
totally understand.
there's a lot of stuff. You worked in insurance and I worked on it
Yep.
nationwide for a while. So there's a lot of that in high compliance organizations
Yeah, yeah.
that are tough. I think your role uh, as a leader, I didn't say manager,
Mhm.
is to protect the team,
Yeah,
right? From that as much as you can,
yeah.
right? And be very careful when you engage the team. So I guess my job, and I tell my team that is, I mean, I wish I was an IC. I tell them this, and I believe it. I wish I was an individual contributor. I wish I was an IC. But my best role for the company and our team is to be your windshield, right? And make sure
Mm,
the bugs splat on the windshield and not on you guys. That allows them to have their best ideas
yeah,
and they're not distracted. So I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but for me, you have to protect the team
yeah,
and you
yeah,
go do the things that have to be done and try and make sure that you get the right kind of outcome so that they're not pulling the team in 40 different directions.
yeah, yeah,
That's
I would agree.
hard to
I mean,
do.
yeah, I spent many years in financial services,
Yeah. Yeah.
this time that I'm here in the insurance industry, um, comprised of the last 9 years of
Yeah.
my career. So I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's it can be a tough environment to work in. So I
It can be, but, KeyBank just hit 200 years, and it's pretty
wow,
remarkable.
congrats.
Yeah,
That's
it's pretty
awesome.
remarkable to represent a company that's doing that, and we have a fantastic, online banking system, so at the same
Mhm.
time, the trick I think as leaders is to allow that to happen because regulators are regulators, and you have to make them happy, and you have to do what they need, but how do you innovate in that world? I think it's protecting your teams and
Mhm.
and allowing them to still innovate.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, I think one of the elements of innovation is and elements of leadership
Mhm.
is inspiration and
Yeah,
looking to leaders for inspiration. How do you inspire others to lead? Especially in hard times or when
yeah.
when people are uncertain. What have you found actually works?
Um, I'm not positive. I attribute it, I guess, maybe to me. I'm a pretty inspiring person. I don't know how I'm that way. Uh, uh, um, I think it's because I'm really, really passionate about what I do, and I love what I do. I'm 70
Yeah,
years old, and I'm not stopping. I don't want to stop. I really
yeah,
love what I do, and I think it's infectious across
yeah.
the
The
team.
word I was going to use is authentic. I
It was
think you're
authentic
I
to
think you're
you.
very, very authentic.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think that goes a long way.
yeah,
Especially
and
when you're
then I
talking
do it
about some of
too.
these
Yeah,
exact
Michael will tell you never stop developing.
yeah,
Uh,
100%.
why? Because, you have to still be in their world,
Mhm,
and so I still write a lot of code, and I think my 40 years of coding really paid off, because I write some really good code,
mhm,
and I write some good models. I always think about how do I abstract what I'm doing without
Yep.
overthinking it. And
Yep.
so one is in just being inspiring, I guess, authentic, right? But also having the chops,
Mhm.
being their partner in the trenches. If you're up outside of the trenches and you don't understand the tech and you don't get any of it, you're just managing people, you're done. You're fried.
Yeah.
You
Well
can't
said.
inspire a team. You can keep the HR people happy, I guess, or something like that. I don't know. That's not
I
my
don't know.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep coding if you
It's
don't,
it
or do infra or set up networks. Don't stop doing that. That's probably you asked me, maybe you're going to ask me what was the one thing I regret. And I worked for Microsoft for 12 years. I ended up getting roped into methodology. And I
Yeah.
wrote Microsoft services methodology that's still used today. We
Mhm.
pushed it out to 14,000 people, and it was extremely prescriptive.
Mhm.
Uh, I lost my chops, and the tech changed a lot.
Yeah.
And I really regret that. It took me years to catch back up again.
Yeah. I hear you. Technology moves very, very fast without a
Really
doubt.
fast. And I,
And to your point that, you're, when we use the word inspiring and we use the word
mm,
authentic, I think the term that to me sort of encapsulates it is leaders who don't merely walk the walk, but
yeah,
talk the talk,
yeah,
who aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty and and
hmm,
and make mistakes in full visibility of the team,
yeah,
and admitting those mistakes and learning from those mistakes in full visibility, I think,
yeah,
is an important part of leadership. And it sounds to me like those are the things that
yeah.
have been a part of that equation of your for your success as a leader.
And I would say the last thing that's it doesn't seem like it's important, but I think it is having a method to your madness.
Yeah.
And so I never start anything without thinking about the elevator pitch, the vision, the
Right.
mission.
Right.
I don't start anything without thinking about the team model to implement that. And I
Yeah.
and there's all this discipline that I instill in the team, and I think that maybe isn't inspiring necessarily, but it drives confidence, and without that, you can't have those other two things.
Yeah.
Be inspiring without your team feeling that this guy knows what he's doing. It's not his first goat rodeo. He's been around. And this method, after 7 years, we still do it. I say, should we change anything? Nope. Right?
It's a great question to ask.
No, every year
I hear you.
you have to have feedback loops to improve, right?
Very, very
Never,
true.
never, ever, ever assume you're right about
Yeah.
anything.
Well said, man.
All
Well
changes,
said.
right?
I'll be honest with you. I think it's rare to find leaders who are as senior as you are that still are in the code, still coding, still building models.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it was Michael that I saw him at a Ruby on Rails conference in Portland,
yeah.
and he spoke there, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" Because he was still in the trenches, yet he was like the head of Apple software development or something, but he still coded every day.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I went, "That's it. That's it." Never. He
That's
just
the
said
way to do it.
it
That's
was
your path.
it was directive, right? It wasn't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is a good idea. No, this was directive. Never stop coding. That's the way he put it.
Yeah, heck yeah. I love that. I love that. So speaking of
Mm,
technology, obviously technology, as we've said,
yeah.
moves very, very fast. What excites you most about the future of technology right now? And is there anything that keeps you up at night?
Well, I mean, the things that keep me up at night are probably weird paranoid stuff, but I think our infrastructure, like the under the sea wires and the networks, and our reliance on Google and cloud service provider, and I guess my fear is that it's pretty easy to attack. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in place, but
Hmm.
all you need to do is take a ship across the sea and cut up all those wires. Man, that would cause such a serious outage. So I think what keeps me up at night is how much we rely. on trust of other folks to keep all this stuff up and running and keep it
Yeah.
humming. And then so I don't know, that it seems kind of weird, but I always worry about that I'll turn my computer on today and the internet won't be there and it won't
Mhm.
be back up for, actually I probably really like that, but I won't be able to work very well. But
Right.
you know what I'm saying? So I just
Yeah.
that's one of the things that the reliance on so much really really complicated tech. You know, I used to have this picture. It's kind of related here of over on this side was like a PC, and then the other side was like cloud infrastructure and servers and network switches and all that. And an arrow on the top said, "I work here.
Mhm.
Don't ask me about your viruses on your computer."
Hmm.
Right? And but it's that whole
Wow.
ecosystem is really important. But I work there. I don't know anything about workstations, and if I had
Yeah,
my
I hear
way,
you.
I would use them. I use my Mac, but I'm in my terminal all day.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting.
I would say that yeah, if someone wants me to write something, I do it in Vim.
Do
My
you really?
yeah.
Not even GVim. You're old school.
Oh yeah, Vim command line.
I'm
I mean,
with you,
I know
man.
it so well. And
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
had a manager a couple of years ago, and my year-end reviews, I'd send him as MD files. He loved that.
That's awesome.
I checked it into Git and it said, here's my
Yeah.
repo. Here's he actually really liked that. He got it. My new manager would not
Wow.
like that. He wouldn't know how to read it.
I remember when
So
I was at Huntington, and I ran their architecture practice, and I'll never forget when we rolled out a brand new distributed teller system for all the branches, and to replace the green screen mainframe systems
yeah,
that all of the tellers and bank branch employees would use.
yeah.
And I tell you what, people felt they didn't want number one, they didn't want to change to the new system, but it
Oh
really
no.
primarily was because they were so much more efficient
Yeah, yeah,
on the green screens because they knew all the shortcuts and all the keys and everything. And then with the fancy new web-based application, now they got to rely on a mouse and clicking between pages and screens and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the whole model, the event-driven model is totally different. I worked for a company in my early days in IT, and it was in St. Paul, Minnesota. It was called Twin City Testing.
Yeah.
One of the jobs I had up there was to replace, put this, I put WordStar in essentially. And I built a whole network based on these they were cards that have a whole PC on them, and it had a RS-232 port that went to a terminal, a WISE terminal, and I put about 40 of those throughout, and we ran WordStar.
Hmm.
And I knew it was coming, but rest of the folks didn't. And there were these big rooms, row after row after row after row of IBM Selectrics with
Hmm.
people at the keyboards typing up reports for their testing.
Right.
They went down to 3 people. And guess what was the one thing that troubled everybody is they they couldn't understand where they would put their whiteout on the screen.
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
man.
I know, but that
Wow.
was that hard for them. They said, "No, no,
Yeah.
don't take that away."
Hmm.
Right? And it was all templatized and everything like that. But it was actually really sad,
Yeah.
frankly, to see so many of those folks have to.
Well, it's it's been interesting. I can speak for myself. I
Yeah,
think you've been doing this a little bit longer than I have. It has been a fascinating journey to
yeah,
see, and to your point, that as we become more distributed, we become more and more and more, with the advent of the internet, with
reliant.
cloud computing, and all these other things. We become less and less, more and more reliant on other folks
Yes,
and the contracts that we have with these folks to
yeah,
provide the services that we're paying for. And
mhm,
so on the one hand, it's kind of like it's true. It's true advancement in terms of technology. There's
yeah.
a hell of a lot more we can do today. I
But
mean,
what's the
with
human
cloud,
impact?
with
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine not having cloud computing? I mean, there's so many technologies that
Oh,
came out of that, that sit on top of cloud computing that I don't know how we would have, I don't think we'd have mobile phones. I don't think we
No.
wouldn't have AI. It's amazing. So in the spirit of that and the
Yeah, yeah,
advancement of technology, um, can and and just your love for technology and programming, can you share a time where technology helped solve a problem that felt impossible or at
yeah.
least deeply stuck?
Sure. Lots of them. Um, I, I think the biggest one that had a really great story is I was working for Allstate Finance, which is part of Allstate Insurance, but their financial arm, and
Okay. Yep.
they were a new entity because of, I don't remember who was around then, maybe first Bush or somebody, but there was this whole insurance deregulation, and insurance companies were now able to sell financial product.
Hmm.
And so Allstate Insurance created Allstate Finance across the street in Illinois, and and they had some pretty horrible mainframe based product to be able to sell product.
Hmm.
And in that world, you were in insurance. There's, I think it's the done rating or something like that. How well people's like internet presence or their web presence or whatever it was for their
Hmm.
service offerings.
Right.
And they're light years now past that. And
Sure.
so, anyways, I got I got assigned as a tech lead and a PM lead for that. And and when we got into it, I knew that we couldn't just kind of win, but we really had to win
Yeah.
because there was a lot of focus on it. It was many millions of dollars, huge teams.
Right.
And so we started off with adopting, first of all, Sapient was a company, I'll use their name, and
Hmm.
they built all the initial designs. I'll talk about
Yep.
that in a second. And so we thought that was cool. All the designs are done, and then they were going to use VB6,
I remember those days.
and I put a stop to it.
Hmm.
Right, because .NET was 3 months before it was being shipped, but it wasn't out yet,
Yep. Yep.
and everybody uh, at Allstate were really pushing back hard.
Hmm.
You
Because
can't
they were
do
more
that,
concerned about getting the product out the door and not
and
waiting. Yeah.
using untested, and
Yeah.
what is this .NET thing that
Yeah.
Microsoft's doing? It doesn't make any sense.
Hmm.
And it was a big app, and I started thinking about if you remember DCOM and COM, it was
Yeah.
not a pretty sight when you're trying to build middleware. It's all single
Very
threaded.
complicated.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
Yep.
it's co-processing, single threaded. It wasn't really complicated. It just couldn't handle the load.
Right.
And so we got
Really hard to do resource sharing and things like that.
impossible.
I have a similar story when I was at Nationwide building web-based applications in C++ and CGI. Yeah,
Oh,
same
really
kind of
hard to
stuff.
do. Yeah,
It's hard to do.
really hard to do at scale.
Yeah.
And so then, anyways, we finally got the big guns come in at Microsoft, and we got them to switch to with guarantees about support to .NET.
Mhm.
And in this case, .NET did the web. It did the front. VB didn't do any of that for the web that well. We went ahead and adopted that. We did have some initial problems, but we got patches right away, and eventually we got the thing out the door. But during that process, we noted that the $8 million that Allstate spent on Sapiens design, we had to throw it all out.
Really?
And I really learned a lot about big upfront design because as we got into it and we got deeper into it, we got better requirements. Oh, people are still using modems.
Mhm.
Can't have heavy pages for that. People
Very
have,
true.
back then, you're lucky if they have ISDN, or is that what it's called? Or something like that. They had the old, before DSL
Mhm.
connections. So the kind of connections we had were really slow. So the pages that they designed were huge and didn't work. And the processes and flows changed since a year or 2 years ago when they designed all that. So I learned a
Right.
lot about big upfront design. And so we still pivoted and kept going. And we finally got the product out the door. And we did it was the first time I ever did CI. It wasn't even, I don't think it was called CI at that time.
Mhm.
But we built all these tests and unit tests,
Yep.
We built because .NET at that time in Visual Studio had an ability for me to run things through an integration test through automation, so we could get feedback almost immediately about anything. And so we
Hmm.
got all of and I learned to pull all these people together in one war room for the whole thing. All the testers, the developers, the designers, we all worked together. I had read Skunk Works at that time,
Nice.
and I was copying that and
Heck
that
yeah.
idea. Why not? I call it case, copy and steal everything.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm with you.
and
Yeah.
so then, anyways, we shipped the product. The killer was the done came in after they saw the site, and we went from I don't know 100 or whatever, it was really low, to number
Mhm.
3
Wow.
on the done list, and that was considered a huge win. And I think it was
Just by bringing people together.
and doing it on the right platform, making sure it was
Yeah.
scalable, make sure we paid attention to user interface design,
Yeah.
performance testing, experience testing, UAT testing, functional testing, making sure that it was solid as a rock.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the conversation earlier when
Yeah.
we were talking about putting the right constraints in place. When you put the right constraints in place,
Yeah.
all of a sudden problem solving
Yeah.
flourishes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
tell you, there was this one time, it was pretty funny. In retrospect, we were getting close to shipping
Yeah.
and our first release, and we didn't have MVPs back then. It was big bang, big thing had to go out the
Sure.
door.
Yeah.
And I was in the cafeteria, uh, and there was this big glass uh, wall to a little lake outside of the offices, and I was facing the team, and I was just talking to them about all of the things that were happening. We used to have a meter in on the show down in our war room, which is called the
Mhm.
Murphy meter, the Murphy's law, and it was either high or it was like a weather report, and it was really so
Oh boy.
it was in the red.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
in the red. So I talked about all the things that'll happen and how we had to stay focused and ship while this is happening. It's getting darker and darker and darker behind me. And I just
Hmm.
laid out this horrible story. And then I started saying, but if we get this done, and like then the sun came out and it was shining through. So everybody, could see their faces. And I was going, well,
Wow.
what happened?
And don't stop believing started playing.
Don't start believing it. Yeah, I wish I had that song back then. But that's leading,
Yeah.
is when you say it like it is and you give them an alternative story,
Yeah.
which is one not stuck in their head.
There you go, man.
Yeah.
I love it. What a great story.
That was really funny. I didn't see it, but
Yeah, because you were facing the
I was
wrong.
facing the wrong way, but
And
everybody
then
was saying
afterwards, did everybody
they
come
felt
up to
like,
you and were
oh,
like, "You wouldn't
everybody
believe
came to
the."
me and says, "What do you come some of a god or something?" I don't know. I don't know. I was just talking to you guys.
Oh, that is so awesome.
The
What's
let's just say the universe was
yeah.
with me.
Hey, some days the universe is with you, some
Someday?
days it's just
No.
not.
Right.
What would you say is maybe a piece of advice that you've given in the past that,
Hmm.
with more experience you'd now revise or completely rethink?
Well, sure. I mean, there's so many of them, but I mean,
Yeah.
as a it's this weird thing about me. I don't know why it is. Since I was a kid, I was always kind of I would end up being in a lead position. I never asked for it. I never wanted it,
Mhm.
and it was always like when I was in show business, I would start off, and a few months later, I'd be like the tent boss
Right, right.
because I knew how to lead teams, and I knew how to get things done, and I knew how to get things out of the way, and continuously do that. I think at one time, I think I was pretty harsh, uh, and it seems like psychological stuff. Probably it is, and I was not very empathetic
Mm,
to folks on my team. I felt that, and I really kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, dealt with people like widgets.
like, not as people.
No, just as agents to get stuff done, but
Right, right.
not as this is a human being that has experiences and emotions, what's going on. I had an experience with a woman who is Chinese, uh, and she came to me and said that she really, really wanted to be in a leader program, and I kind of laid it out for her. Says, I would like you to do that. You're really good,
Mhm.
and I think you're ready for that. And then she had to go to China, and when she came back, she was in the new role.
Mhm.
Uh, and then I heard that she was really angry at me and was thinking about leaving the company because
Really?
I undermined her and I wasn't allowing her to develop anymore.
Hmm.
And that
I
was not me not recognizing her as a human being, really trying to get to the core of what was underneath her switching, right?
Mhm.
And also making a decision that I thought was the right decision, but it was not the right decision at all.
Hmm.
And I switched her right back. So she started coding and she was happy again. But I didn't, but it took weeks before, because of cultural differences, for me to even hear about it through other people. Did you hear that June was this way? And I had no idea. I thought I was doing the right thing. So there was a lot of that, not that just one, where I made a wrong decision with somebody and it pissed them off or it wasn't what
Mhm.
they wanted really. And I really didn't spend time understanding who they are and what they really wanted outside of what was coming out of their mouth, right?
Right,
People
right.
don't always say what they mean exactly. People are so complicated. Why you should all read
Yes.
Managing Humans.
Yes, yes.
They're not widgets. So yeah, I mean, I think waking up to human beings
Mhm.
and and uh, and the beauty and the complexity of that, and trying to make that work in a team environment is a life's goal, to be able to do that. And
Yeah. That sounds a lot different from how earlier in the conversation when sort of opined that, you really wanna be a CI, or an IC, an individual
yeah, right,
contributor.
yeah.
And,
I do, but I wouldn't be good at it in terms of my contribution.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
But I wonder, I mean, there's lots of folks in tech. I'll say this. This is
yeah,
sort of you know, if if there was to be in my mind, a confessions of the technology industry, perhaps there'd be a section in there
sounds like a great
about
book,
yeah,
a
but
blog.
about how
Mm.
I believe
Yeah,
that there's a lot of really bad managers
yeah,
in technology. And it's because there's a couple of things. One is people generally come into the technology field because they enjoy technology,
yeah,
not because they dream of managing people. And then you put them in a position where, in order for you to progress and, earn more money for your family and so forth, you eventually have to start managing people. And so you're facing this in a situation. This is probably same in other industries as well.
yeah,
But you're faced with a situation where you've got people who aren't passionate about managing people who are
yeah,
now being thrust into these and making the decision to do it because maybe probably for the wrong reasons. And I'll admit for myself, man, like this is why I took the architecture route so many years ago. Is because I wasn't interested in managing people.
yeah,
But to your point, management, leadership, focusing on your people and finding a way to grow those skills
yeah,
is that is the secret to success, because at the end of the day all of our companies are comprised of people, and without people and
yeah,
great leaders and great teams you'll get nothing done.
yeah, yeah. The thing is that I very deeply hold the difference between management and leadership as
Yeah, me too,
completely
you're right.
and totally distinct, and they're
Yep.
different skill sets.
Yeah, agree.
Lots of people come to me and staff over the years that want to be leaders or want to be managers, and I handle those conversations differently.
Hmm.
Uh, I've never made somebody a leader uh, unless I call it the dirt in the street raises up and says they're a leader, or said easily. And it's hard to have this conversation with people, but
Mm-hmm.
when somebody is being a leader, consistently and does it
Yeah.
well, then I come to them and say, "You should be a leader, and I'm gonna promote you.
Yeah.
And I need
I love it
you to do those things."
because you've demonstrated it.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
don't because you want it is really not enough.
100%, man.
Oh god. In fact,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that if you're not demonstrating it and you want it for all the wrong reasons,
Yeah. Agree.
right?
And yeah, I would
As
agree.
a manager, if they wanna be a manager, that's an easy conversation. Sure,
Mhm.
sure.
Yep.
But
So,
here's
yeah.
the impact of doing that, right?
Mhm. Yeah. No kidding, man. So, you mentioned show business
I did.
and being the tent boss.
Hmm.
And I have to tell you, you've got one of the best personal intros that I've heard. So you've gotten to tech or you got into tech after quitting life in the
My body gave
circus.
out, yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell that story and looking back, what do you think that
Yeah,
path taught you about adaptation and
a lot.
transformation?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I bet, man.
a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's lots of dynamics going on, in the world. So first of all, in the mid '70s, price of gas was really going up.
Hmm.
I think I remember riding my motorcycle up to the gas station, and for 25 cents, I could fill the tank up.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and or 50 cents, depending how low I was, and that was it. And then it got more and more expensive. We thought like $1 back then was horrible. Well, as
Right.
it turns out, if you're trying to run a show business and everybody's in vehicles to get from show to show, and you're normally doing one night stands or two night stands all over the country,
Hmm.
that's really expensive. So the shows got more and more constrained in what they would give you and how much they'd pay you and so on. And at the same time, my body was uh, was starting to give out. When you're doing physical comedy, which I did, and you're doing 3 shows a day, and I was on a trampoline or I was on a slack wire, you
Really?
twist an ankle or you do a thing, you got a show in an hour or two
Yeah.
hours, and you just got to get on there and do it. And then you got to
Wow.
do it again. And then the next time you do something else until the injuries started piling up. And I kept doing it. But I really couldn't find a time. I guess I'll be honest. I mean, we used to go to Canada because they used to sell Emprum codeines, which not you couldn't get in America. And I buy a lot of it.
Mhm.
And at some point,
Just, for pain management?
yeah, I got addicted to codeine.
Wow. Oh, that had to be so terrible, man.
It was hard to stop, but
I believe it.
I had to do the show. I had to do the next show. I had to do this. So there's all those things together. And then I was on a show. We were up in Quebec. It was a great show. It was a big auditorium show.
Mhm.
Brothers, big, kind of the shrine shows is what it was. And and they wanted to stop paying for our gas.
Oh, really?
I was like, "That's showstopper.
That's it.
That's
Yeah.
more than you pay me this week." And they knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Mm.
so Fabian, my girlfriend, and I left, uh, and we moved back to Minneapolis, where she was from.
Okay.
And then here I am.
There
Now
you
what?
go, man.
I did not think about plan B.
Right.
Nobody
Yeah.
told me about the plan B thing. And so, I was good at doing plumbing, electrical stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was doing work like that. And
Mhm.
I was like, there's got to be a better way. And this is Minneapolis. It's really cold outside.
Very
And
true.
and I don't wanna be working on cars, I don't wanna be working on people's toilets, I don't wanna be working and I'm gonna take away from people that do that, but I didn't wanna do that day after day.
Right.
It
Yeah.
wasn't
Nothing
something
wrong
I
with that.
wanted to do. And this is literally a picture of me, 29 years old, sitting at a chair going, "What now?" A dilemma. And I said, "Well," start writing down, what are the things I like? I like complex things.
Mhm.
I don't like being cold. I don't like getting dirty. Uh, 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 and I like really complicated things. And I said,
Heck yeah.
well, okay. And there's got to be complicated things that I can fix because I knew I was a good fixer of things.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there staring and I go, well, that wasn't helpful. And I looked in front of me and I saw a typewriter and I went, whoa, those are really complicated. And I opened it up, started looking through it, and I went, this is really complicated.
Yeah.
And I went, somebody must fix typewriters, right?
Sure.
So I
Sure.
looked in the phone book and I got a whole list of all the phone company, all the typewriter repair guys,
Mhm.
and I called them all up
Mhm.
and I said, "Hi, I want to fix typewriters for you." And well, you have to go to school for that. And they went, "Well, I want to. I don't want to go to school. I want to
I
start."
see. You'll understand, I'm good at fixing things.
I trust you. Trust me. And I called this one company, CalcType, and I was
Mhm.
talking to Peter, an Austrian. Uh, and he goes, "Really, you want to fix things?" And I said, "Yeah, I know I can do it and I'm good." And he says, "You really think you're that good?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he says, "I like you. Come in."
Really?
And I had a long
Okay.
beard and long crazy hair.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I went in, he talked to me, he gave me this cognitive test, which is like gears going this way and that way. And it was like a mechanical aptitude test. And I did really well on it.
Mhm.
And he takes me out on the floor and says, "Here, have a seat here. I'll be right back." And he comes back and he puts this red Valentine horrible portable typewriter in front of me. And he says, "Fix it." He starts walking away. And I said, "Peter," and he goes, "What? What's wrong with it?" He looks at me and goes, "You're going to be good, aren't you?"
Uh-huh.
And then he starts walking away again. And he showed me and he says, he walks away. And I said, "Peter." He goes, "What now?" He says, "I need some tools." And so he said, "The guy next to you gives some tools." And about a minute later, I fixed it. It was really easy. It was
Really?
this gear on the back. When you hit the space bar, it forwards the thing. And it
Right,
had,
right.
the gear had come off and the screw was loose. I just
Oh,
pushed it back, tightened it down. And he looks at me and goes, "That's pretty good." He says, "Cut your hair, shave your beard, 225 an hour. You start next week."
wow. What a great story, man.
I said, "Fantastic." Well, how did that get me here? Uh, then I worked on typewriters and I became the head mechanic in the shop of doing like
Mhm.
overhauls on both Olivetti's and Selectrics and that kind of stuff, complete teardowns and all. I really love that. And then this thing shows up that pisses everybody off. And it's the first daisy wheel typewriter.
Okay.
And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I could fix that."
Uh-huh.
And I open it up and I go, "Oh,
All these closed components in there with,
there's
circuit boards and
a
stuff. Yeah.
system board and then a little bit of mechanics on the daisy wheel,
Yeah.
which was obviously replaceable, not fixable."
Right.
I went, "Oh shit." So I went to my boss and I said, "Hey man, I really want to start fixing these things." Why? Because well, Circus was a dead end. And
Right.
clear as a bell, typewriters are a dead end. They're not going to be around. I
Yep.
still didn't really look very far out. I went, "Damn, that's interesting."
Mhm.
Uh, Gary, who's my manager, said, "Oh, I can't, man. You don't have seniority." I went, "Okay," and I quit
Wow.
and I moved to Youngstown, Ohio, from
Really?
Minneapolis. Yep,
Wow.
in Canton actually, and I worked for another company, and I started doing the repairs on their typewriters, and I started trying to learn it, and I went, "I can't figure the electronic stuff out. It's too weird." So I went back to Minneapolis and I went to the Brown Institute of Electronics
Mhm.
and I learned electronics. And then in the day,
Wow.
I was still working at a typewriter repair place, and then I started getting good at the electronics, and I started doing repairs on typewriters and calculators and the electronic pieces.
Sure,
I
sure.
got really really good at it,
Hmm.
and then I graduated, and then I continued to work in the field, and then the first computers came out, and I was doing board level repair on them. And I remember the first IBM PCs came out, and I worked for a rental company that was renting computers. And so, I started fixing, computers, and I took the electronic skills, and I completely stopped working on typewriters,
Yeah.
and and I ran a shop, and we were super successful. Uh, but then these companies started sprouting up that would fix your motherboard for $45,
Hmm.
and I with my staff, we were like charging 75.
Wow.
And I went, "I don't want to be in this business anymore because it's another dead end."
Right.
Nobody really does hardware At Google, when a system goes out, they pull it out, throw it in the trash, and shove another one
100%.
in.
That's right.
It's all board replacement. I said, that's not the world I want to live in. At
Yep.
the same time, I had written this company's inventory system.
Hmm.
And
So you had gotten into software development.
yeah, I mean, if you're in that field back then, you were doing both. You had to.
Yeah.
There's in the microcomputing world, there's nobody there to do it. It was all up to you.
Yep.
And so I just had this kind of this view. It taken some classes from this company called Landmark Education, and they kind of got down I was able to get down to the core of what I really liked about it, and I realized that software engineering was just as fun as fixing typewriters.
Yeah.
It's all these little things tied together, but it's just real
100%,
good.
man. Yep.
And so I made a commitment one day, and I said, "That's it. I'm going to only do software for the rest of my career, and I'm not going to do hardware anymore." And
Heck yeah.
here I am.
There you go, man.
That's how I got there, from the
That's
circus to software.
what an incredible story, man.
So, do any of those skills translate? Hell yeah! I mean, you're still leading teams. You're still trying to balance your life,
Yeah.
as best you can. You're still
You're still
building.
solving hard problems,
Solving
fixing things.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a lot that's all full of mud, you gotta figure out how to put the tent up. So, yeah, these kind of things, you're constantly working in a team world because you
Mhm.
can't put a tent up by yourself, that's idiotic.
That's right.
Um, and you have to do these things at scale. I mean, these tents are huge, and there's big teams, like 50 people to put a tent up. So I'm used to now working with big teams and getting them to work together,
Mhm.
and going back to being in the trenches. I think I weighed 125 pounds then. And I was in great shape because I was, a gymnast.
Mhm.
I had a 20-pound sledgehammer,
Mhm.
and we would pound the stakes all the way around, over 400 stakes all the way around the thing. And I was on the tent. I was on the hammer cruise,
Really.
and I was better than any one of them because I knew how to use my body.
Right.
I knew how to use the weight of the hammer. And
Man.
there'd be like four of us around a stake and do and push them in like that. But
Yeah.
that was the beginning of me learning respect and knowing you had to
Huh.
stay in the trenches with the team. You
Yeah.
couldn't just be on there smoking your cigarettes and telling people what to do. You had
Yep.
to be there with them. You had to be guying the tent out. You had to be up on the tent, to,
Yep.
tying off the pulleys and that kind of stuff. You had to be the best of the riggers. I was hands down one of the best riggers. But anyways, that applies today in the same exact ways.
Agree.
Here's the thing: is I never hire somebody who's not multidisciplinary.
Yep.
They scare me.
Yeah. I'm with you, man.
Yeah, I
Makes
mean,
a lot of sense.
I always hire musicians or carpenters or
People who yeah.
bikers,
Who
some other thing in life other than
yeah.
IT.
And demonstrating that they're balancing those
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah,
They're able to do that. That's really well said, man.
yeah.
Wow.
Anyway,
Well,
that's my story. That's how I got from there to there.
yeah, I gotta tell you, Mick, this has been an awesome ride.
Wow. Tell me,
So
I was in it. It was.
oh, I believe it, man.
Yeah.
So, I tell you what, man, before we close, I would love to ask you if there's one lesson that, you've learned that you hope every technologist or leader hears loud and clear.
Mhm.
What is it?
Well, again, it sounds kind of up in the air, but being 70 years old, but it's always been there for me.
Mhm.
Is that I remember reading something about Buckminster Fuller.
Mhm.
He's the guy who invented the geodesic dome and spaceship Earth and all that kind of stuff. And
Got you.
early in his life, things were hard, and he was about to commit suicide.
Hmm.
And he was naked in somewhere, and he was walking into the ocean, and he got out there and he realized that everything he had put together was obsolete and done. And he felt like that was depressing until he saw, wait, I'm a blank slate.
Hmm.
And then he thought, wow, what difference can I make in my life now that I
Wow.
know that I don't have to use my history and I can invent myself in a way that I can find something? And he, of course, did. His story is fantastic after that point. The one thing I would always take away is ask yourself every day, what difference am I making to my team, my organization, my family? Um, and if you're not, stop doing that immediately. Do what you love, but make sure it's making a difference. I don't mean love like selfish, but love you are inspired and you inspire other people. I would say that's the number one thing I leave people with, I would say, is make a difference with your life because you're not going to be around for a long time. And this is the time. This is the time to make that difference right now in this
I
moment.
love it, man.
So,
Talk about a call to action, man. Thank
yeah,
you.
get her done.
Well, I got to tell you, man, thank you
Yeah,
so
sure.
much.
Anytime.
And seriously, for your honesty, your insight, your authenticity, and just to sharing so much about your story today, man.
You bet,
It's
man.
going to really resonate with our community.
I
So,
hope, or else I'm gonna get fired from work. That
no
not
way,
work
man.
for us.
No way. No way. So on that note, on the positive note, on
Yes,
the call
right.
to action,
Yeah.
to our listeners, hey, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it, and remember, no matter how hard things get, don't stop believing.
Don't stop believing.
That's right.
I
Thanks,
hope you
man.
put that on the soundtrack if you can.
That'd be awesome, man. Heck yeah.